Welcome to section 2, building your code with Webpack. In this section, we're going to cover how to set up Webpack 2, which is the latest version of Webpack, how to use Babel to write ES6 and ES7 code in your application, loading SCSS or CSS or less, so CSS compilation effectively. We're going to have a look at how that works and how you can use Webpack to do that. Loading images in using Webpack, compressing your assets, so making the website that you're building smaller so that when your user downloads it, it's not as big. Then we'll go on to see how you can use Webpack to hot reload to make for a better development experience. Tree shaking, which is a fancy new feature of Webpack 2, which allows you to remove some of the code that gets built into the final thing and eliminate code which is just not used. And then we'll look at two tools, so Neutrino and Next.js, both of which use Webpack internally, but make the whole thing a little bit easier to manage and set up in the first place. Setting up Webpack. In this video, we're going to look at how we can set up Webpack so that it builds our React code into an asset which we can run in both dev mode or for when we're releasing a production website. Okay, so here's the Webpack example part of the code that's provided with the course. This code base has Webpack set up already. I'm going to run you through the sorts of things that are in here based on the last section that help get Webpack set up. So first of all, you'll notice there's a whole bunch of dev dependencies. There's a bunch of Babel stuff, and then there's a bunch of loaders. You'll see loader mentioned in here a bunch of times. And then there's some plugins mentioned 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 times. A few other bits and pieces, and then we've got Webpack and Webpack development server. Now, all of that was in dev dependencies because none of this stuff actually runs when your website's running inside the browser. So when your user opens up your web page, none of this stuff is going to do anything at that point. All of this stuff happens first to produce the website in the first place. That's why it's a dev dependency and not a dependency. In terms of dependencies for this project, we've actually got very little. We've got the Babel runtime and we've got Lodash, which anything else you'd want to use inside your website. So maybe, React or Angular or whatever, that would live in here. So the lion's share of this project is taken up by this really big scary file called the webpack.config.js. So almost every Webpack project will have this. They can look quite different and they can be quite long and a little bit scary. We're not going to run through everything that's in here and what it all means right now. I'm going to do that as we run through this section. But essentially it's saying how to build the project and stuff like which files to look at. It's basically the config for Webpack, which tells it how to work. So you're going to need one of these. Now, this code will all be made available to you, so you can use this code if that's what you want to do. I think in general, if you're using Webpack, a pretty solid place to start is to find a decent seed project somewhere on GitHub where someone else has already done the hard work of setting up most of this stuff for you. Or use a higher level tool such as Neutrino or Next.js, which will use Webpack internally but won't mean that you have to configure a lot of this stuff. Webpack is a bit of a monster and people joke about it quite a lot in the current development environment that we're working in the Node community, but there are a lot of different options. It sometimes does go wrong. For the most part, what you'll find is if you get a solid config, like this one I've been using for months and months now, I change it very infrequently. So if you get something that works, you're probably not going to need to come in here unless you've got a new type of file you want to load into your project or there's something new you want to do. But most of the time, you'll probably find a config, you'll be happy with it, and you'll stick with it. So let's see this thing actually run. So if we jump into a console, we can run npm install. So to get started running this project, we can run npm install. That's going to install all of those dependencies and dev dependencies that we need to run Webpack. So once we're done, there are a few commands we can run. So if we switch back to the package.json file, we can see what commands are already in this project. So we've got build, which builds a folder full of assets, which I'll show you a bit later on. And then we've got start, so that That allows us to start up this thing and use it for development purposes. So let's try running it. npm run start. So that's running on port 3000. So now if we go to port 3000, so there we go, we can see our site running on port 3000. Now if we jump into the console, we'll see it prints hello there. Let's take a look at the code again. You can see, so it's running index.js. So there we are, up and running with Webpack and serving up a very basic site.